Yes to everything. All right. As you know, Larry, and yes to everything is a critical thinking activity. And I'm going to challenge you to say yes to no matter what question I ask. And uh, I'll be honest, the first two are benign. I would ask them to anybody. But the last one is especially for you. And that's the tough one. Would the world be better off if we just eliminated all the borders?
No, I do not think the world would be a better place without borders.
Oh,
Oh no, it's oh sorry, it's I
yeah,
slipped back.
me
Sorry.
either, me either. But the game is yes to everything.
Right there. Yes, I think the world would be a better place without borders. Because when we lift the silos that stratify human beings into different localities, what we do is we make each individual a citizen of humanity, such that the well-being of one person in the far north would be equal to the well-being of someone in the south, for example. It's when we silo individuals into countries, communities, race, ideologies, it's where we have otherization, where we have conflict of interest. It's when we think other people are different from ourselves that we have tendencies towards war, disaster, and all the virtues that are not worth upholding. And so, in some sense, if you lift up borders, if you allow people to cross pollinate ideas, that's where you have tolerance, that's where you have a better place to live in. So, that's how I would defend this position.
Well done. Wow. Can you be my debate student, please?
I certainly didn't think I was
That's really awesome. Well done.
Thank
I
you so
love
much.
how quickly you switched gears and then you made a credible argument as if, you could have talked about it for days.
That is
But
right.
isn't that interesting how, when debaters talk, you just want to believe them. It
Well,
doesn't matter
exactly.
if this side of the argument, that side of the argument. And it's almost a danger when debating falls into the wrong hands. Because you can
Exactly.
imagine if somebody who's really good at speaking, like
Mhm.
you, but has very bad intentions or very terrible ideology, but
Right.
you could do that. Like you could easily be a wonderful debater. So that I just saw the evidence right there. So tell me, you don't believe it, right?
No, I don't. So this would be an ideal picture. So when you ask that question, I presume you're asking a question in practicality. So would it be feasible to lift all borders and allow people to cross-pollinate ideas and self? I don't think that's possible. I think I'm not an economist. I'm not a population geneticist. But my idea, if I'm not to sound like a charlatan, it would be that there are serious economic implications that would arise from something of the sort of
Yeah, but
free.
well, I mean, we saw almost a prototype for this with the European
Mhm.
Union, right?
Right.
And then economically, they did open all the borders. And
Mhm.
I remember my people are from Austria, and when I was
Mhm.
visiting there, you could drive from one country to the other without any hassle after the EU was formed. And yes, and some countries were richer, like Germany, and then some countries were poor, like Greece and Spain. But at the end of the day, this kind of economic allyship that it worked and it made everybody stronger. So
Right.
don't you think it could work on a global scale?
I mean, it is conceivable that there is some way that this could work, but in fact, in questions like these, I try to relegate them to empiricism. So there is a right answer to this question we're asking, and it's one that could only be found out through experimentation, through planning out clever research. Because what you're saying as an evidence in European Union is good evidence for the null hypothesis that removing borders would facilitate good human development and growth. But it might not be the case for maybe trying to do that cross-culturally, globally. It might be that the synergy between non-European countries might confound this thing that we want to do. And so it's in some sense an empirical question. And anything we say here is just speculation. And maybe it is educated speculation, but I think it's empirical question nonetheless.
Well, my dad used to say the world would be a better place if we had more borders, far more. Like right now we have about 230 countries, and he said if we have about 750 countries, the world will be a better place, because then we can parcel like-minded people, let them live together. Like, if you had the people of British Columbia living together with the people of Northern California, they all have the same kind of mentality. Could let them
Right.
all, and he said, what are the most successful countries where according to the happiness index is those
Right.
Scandinavian
And
countries.
right.
And they have
Exactly.
like 5 million people each. So if we had parcels of 5 million people, then you could conceive of a democratic process that's actually representing them and their needs. Because how can a government work when there's a centralized government and a billion people and
Right.
all of their needs?
Right. I mean, I would disagree with your father for that reason. Although I think my hunch is that removing borders would not be feasible. But I think siloing people into very narrow groups. I mean, in that narrow sense in which he is talking about, so in terms of maybe economic growth and all of that, that might be true. But when we're looking at the issue of whether we should lift the borders, it's a question of does that maximize well-being in on balance? So if we consider everything else, the virtues we want to uphold, tolerance, and all those things that can't be quantified by just monetary currency. Would that be feasible? I think the answer is no. We see that on social media where siloing of ideas and echo chambers just lead to misinformation and xenophobia and intolerance on the scale that is actually
Well,
quite.
xenophobia doesn't isn't a border kind of a symbol of xenophobia? It's
It
doesn't it
is.
say this, like, this is us and you are the other, and
It is.
so isn't the root of all human conflict the feeling that one group is more deserving and better than the other? And
Precisely
so,
right. Precisely
and this is
right.
all symbolized by borders. So if we
Right.
remove the borders, don't we have a chance of unifying and finding solidarity with other human beings?
Right, so that's true. So we have to like avoid swinging the pendulum into the various extremes of the poles. Whereas it is the case that less borders would result in more tolerance. It's not obvious to me that no borders at all would result in maximizing utility or well-being. Just as I think complete siloing doesn't do any of us good. I think the answer is somewhere in the middle. It would because I can foresee some implication that can come from just an open free market where everybody just roams
Of course.
freely.
The answer is always somewhere in the middle, Larry. Truth is in the middle, and that's the gray area.
It
And the
is.
gray area is kind of a large area. And if you're looking for the truth, you have to get in the mud and
Yeah.
search and do some investigation. You can't just simply pluck it from one side or the other.
Yeah,
All
that is
right.
exactly right.
Number two. Here we go. Uh-oh. Is China a more strategic ally for Canada than the United States?
Okay, yes, I believe China is a more strategic ally for Canada than the United States. I think this is because China has shown it's been obvious as they have increased exponentially in their economic growth and their physical revenue that if it truly is the case that Canada is looking towards increasing their wealth and increasing utility in all things that they do, it just seems to me to be the best option to partner with some group or some country that is also increasing exponentially. So that paired relationship just seems to me to be something that will result in increasing growth and all of that. And recently, as we see in the news, China is partnering with other countries to streamline the use of their own currencies, and I think that is a planned move, is a strategic move to undermine the United States. And if Canada wants to be on the bandwagon of wealth and growth, maybe their best bet is to tally in with China.
Yeah, well, it seems like um, the main feature of our relationship with the United States is our economic ties. I mean, we both
Right,
depend each other for trade, like I'm the largest trading partner each.
right,
So, but is that enough of a reason? Like, when we see that the American empire seems to be declining, and
right.
the state of American politics and the civic society, it just seems to be on the decline. And we know that in the curve of history, empires rise and empires fall. And
Right.
right now, it seems like China's on the rise and America's on the fall. So, would it be smart to hitch our ride to China?
Well, I actually think about this as a moral philosophical enthusiast. I don't think that I actually don't hold that position. I don't think that you should only pair with a country or a thing or a person just because they're a means to some end. And here the end would be economic growth or economic uprise, I think there is some moral question that one has to ask. I mean, in some sense, Canada and US are like siblings, and would it be right to leave your sibling in some time of need? It just seems like these are all virtues that
Yeah, but are we siblings? Really? Do we come from the same family? Do we share the same values with Americans? Americans, they want to have guns. They want to protect their guns,
right.
and they have mass shootings every day. What kind of sibling is that?
I think other than that, but I think on balance, I mean, on those specific topics, I think there is that divide. But I think Canada and US, at least to
Yeah,
my
but
understanding,
it's a
more,
pretty big divide. Like when
it
half
is.
of the American population would rather not have a democracy and would rather install Donald Trump as their dictator, why should we have any interest in that? I mean, we see how really, even when I was a kid traveling in the United States and I used to sit in hotels and watch television, and I couldn't believe how the news anchors talk to the people of America
You're right.
like they're children. Like they give them no credit at all. Like they have no intelligence at all. Even the comedy shows were so stupid and simple-minded. And I thought, what are they doing? And the only thing I could come up with was they're dumbing down their populace so that
Right.
they're easier to control. But I think this worked, but it also backfired because now they'll believe anything. And
Right. No,
even all the lies that are spewed. I think that American government has created a monster in a whole populace that believes in conspiracy theories that
right. Right.
requires no evidence in order to believe something,
Right.
and now they have to deal with this Frankenstein's monster.
Right, that's right. This is a good example of what it happens when you swing the pendulum to the far left or to the far right. That's what happens. You get extremists, you get conspiracy theories. Your brain almost falls out. And just like you said, like this Fox News anchor, I think his name is Tucker Carlson, and he is, I guess, I've been reported to be a proponent of Trumpism. And it turns out that he didn't believe in anything he was saying. He hated Trump as was seen in the
Yeah,
memo.
for the last 7 years, I've always known that that guy is such a fake, just like Trump. He's
Right.
such a fake guy. And but the thing about his supporters and his listeners is they don't even care if the truth comes out. They hear, oh, I hate Trump. Next up, they don't even remember from one day to the next. It doesn't matter. They just cling to their ideology. And then this is the
Right,
guy that gives us talking points about how we can own the liberals. That's
right.
it.
But it really falls into a well-known psychological trait known as but actually discovered by Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel behavioral economist, who realized that individuals. So he distinguished individuals into two groups of people: the experiencing self and the remembering self. And the experiencing self is the person that takes account of everything that happens in your day. How do you feel right now? It's your
Yeah.
experiencing self that can give you that analysis. And the remembering self is how you recollect those events. And so it seems that what is happening is that maybe people who support Trump just tend to remember the peak and ends of his administration, the very thing that they agreed with, or the last thing that he did, which was probably something that they agreed with. And that is the totality of who he is, and not maybe the nuances in between. But we all tend to do that psychologically. If you take account of your life, if you look at some terrible experience that you went through, and you now you're in the future and you ask yourself, how did I feel in the past? You're much more likely to look at it as a meaningful experience, maybe even as an experience that you would go for again. And I think there we need to draw the line into when it becomes delusion and when it becomes like cautious uh,
Well, it looks
self-improvement.
like you're much more political than you let on earlier. And
I'm actually not political at all.
well, I like how you humanize the Trump followers and you try to
Right.
relate to them, and because it's very easy to
Very,
just
yeah.
pretend like they're just completely following a cult and
Right.
mindless, right? But to
Right.
me, sometimes it seems like we are living in an apocalypse, a zombie apocalypse, and the zombies are the Trump followers. And as you know, question number three is the tough one. Uh-oh. Okay, yeah, get that water, get that water, get ready. Here we go. Are you ready?
Ready.
All right. Should any efforts by professional football players to appear as individuals from the team be quashed by the management? Should the sports management, the team, demand that they are uniform with all the other players?
Right. I
And you
yes,
must answer yes.
Yes, I think that all efforts by professional football players should appear individual that makes them appear individual should be squashed. Particularly because by definition, what the team sport is that is a collection of individuals working towards a particular goal. And no individual, no the sum of so the whole is not greater than the sum of it. The whole is in this case greater than the sum of its parts. And so the team can only function if all the individuals are working together. Now, when individuals are singularized in team sport, it's only because it's the supporters making or looking at what they think, what they consider is of the greatest utility in the game itself. But maybe that I mean the supporters could be mistaken, and maybe they definitely are mistaken because as I said in a team sport, it requires that each individual play a specific role, even if that role doesn't look too elegant and too charming. That role nonetheless is important towards the growth of the team.
Okay, well done. And so would you then require that guy to cut off his hair?
Of course not. I mean, so no, there's actually a caveat here. If it's in some way obstructive towards the sports being played, then it just seems like it not cut the hair, but like to make it such that it's less of an obstruction would be a fair view for me in my mind.
Well, it reminds me of those guys that were not admitted to the school because of
Right.
their Rasta dreadlocks.
Right.
I mean, isn't like in the army, should we let anyone in the army dress any way they like, have red shoelaces, have tattoos, or grown hair out to here? No, uniform is important. In
It
even
is.
in Buddhist philosophies, that you have to be a nobody before you can be a somebody. You have to learn to be part of a team. You have to work as a team. If you're going to be in a uniform, then behave uniform. So what's the
Right.
point of having a uniform that you're with clothes, but having all the accessories completely
Right.
different from everybody else? So what do you
Of
think
course.
about that?
No, I think it's a separate claim. I think you make a good point here that uniform is important. I think it is, but uh, you must come back to, well, what is the purpose of the military? What is the purpose of education? What's the purpose of anything that we require diversity to be in? In my hunch is that in education, what we strive to do is not to only build people in academic and intellectual pursuits, is to ensure that we can coexist with other people. So that's inbuilt into the telos of education in itself. And
Yes.
so allowing diversity to exist is part of the should be at least part of the aims of education. Whereas something in the military, what we do want to
Yeah.
do is really homogenize every individual, in which case a uniform is exactly in place. I mean, the extent to which that should be it can be subject to debate, but by and large, the uniform in the military is essential to their work, which is why it is
Yes. Well, you bring a good nuance to the conversation because in the military, essentially you have to be uniform. You have to
exactly
know your place in the machine, the rank and file. Because if you
exactly.
take an order, you cannot apply your personal opinion or individuality. You
You're
have to
right,
know your place in the rank and file. But
right.
so that you get broken down. You actually
Mhm.
get broken
You do.
and then remolded into a groupthink. And but
Exactly,
this is not the goal of education. It's quite the
exactly,
opposite, right? So in
exactly,
education, differences should be embraced, right? And it's the
exactly.
strength and diversity.
Right. You hit the nail right on the head.
You
That's
know, there was
exactly
a couple of guys in my teacher's college class,
right.
but they decided midterm that they were going to change their names. They said, "I'm no longer Fred. I'm going to be now Roger." And everybody was like up in arms, like, "You can't do that. You can't change your name. You can't." And they said, "Why not? I don't identify with this name anymore. I want to identify with this name." So, what do you think about that? Like, should people be able to just stamp themselves with a new name every few months, or
I mean, as a question of utility, as a question of practicability, I think people should be allowed to do whatever they want to do. Because the alternative to that would be to say that you know what the right thing is, and everybody should do that if we do know that. I think it's nuanced as I imagine that the reason that they want to change it, we change your name is for maybe some reason that might be slightly not virtuous. So if it is so that they want to cut ties with their cultural heritage, then I don't think that's a virtue worth upholding. But it has to be distinguished that maybe this is something that we don't want them to do, or we don't think it's worth doing. It doesn't uphold any virtue that we would consider in any sense worth emulating. In which case, I mean, you can share your opinion and say that if it is for maybe alienating yourself from your culture, then that isn't a good reason. But to say that
But
they can't be
what
able,
does it do to your personal brand, like the way you think about yourself? Because aren't you your whole life kind of taking the gift of life from your parents, the name they bestowed on you, and then living up to this name and trying to build your name brand and your brand, and then suddenly you change your name? Does that mean you can change your brand as well? Or shouldn't you take pride in the continual kind of accumulation of building up yourself?
no, yes, I think you should take pride in the accumulation of everything that has made you yourself. But then again, that's different from saying that, well, should people be allowed to change their name? I think they should. But I also think that it's worth saying, worth reinstating that your cultural heritage, everything that has made you who you are, is not something
Yeah, but you see,
worth
Larry, this is the stuff that drives the right nuts, the conservatives,
throwing.
because this is the stuff like now I have to remember your pronouns, I have to remember your new name, I have to remember, well, what else do I have to? I'm gonna offend you. I know I am, because you have so many little regulations and rules around you that I can't keep up with it all. And so isn't just having one name and one gender and one, and isn't that just make things easier for us to all identify each other and have like a standardized system that works?
Well, it certainly makes things easier. I'm not quite sure about the scope to which the fact that it makes things easier should be extrapolated to the fact that it should be practiced, right? So I think, but again, I don't I think everybody could be offended by anything. I'm not sure why that should be a clause into why people shouldn't do whatever they want to do. I mean, I guess there are like reasonable limits to that. Like you can't libel, you can't
I
defame
agree. I
someone.
agree. I agree. Like we shouldn't go around so thin-skinned and so easily offended. We should
Right.
work on ourselves and become thick-skinned so that anybody can do or say anything.
Certainly,
However,
that's
but
fine. Yeah.
somebody who keeps changing themselves over and over again gratuitously, aren't they kind of like poking the bear of conservative-minded people who don't like change and don't like any of this stuff? I mean, we're
Right.
living amongst them, like they're out there, and we know that it bothers them. So aren't we just bothering them on purpose, poking the bear?
Right. Maybe I would hesitate to say that it's an intentional act to poke the conservative bears, as it were. Maybe it is. I have no idea. Again, this is an empirical question which can be answered, right? But I think that to the degree in which it's a utilization of the rights that one has, then one is free to do whatever they so please. But insofar as it's an attempt to poke the bears, I think that should even practice if that is exactly the reason that is being done. I think that should be shied away from.
Okay, thank you. Next segment.